Welcome back to Dart Coding Challenge number 3. Since this is our third video, I'm not going to spend a whole heck of a lot of time talking about what these coding challenges are. So if you haven't seen one of them before, please go back and watch Coding Challenge 1 or 2. I'm going to give you the 10-second description of what this is. We are creating a coding challenge. You're going to try to solve it completely on your own per the specifications I give. If you can't solve it, I will provide hints, and at the very end, I will provide 2 solutions of my own to this problem. That's it. Now let's jump right in. This time around, we're going to create an application called Word Counter in Dart, and we're going to use the command line. The user is going to input a sentence, a phrase, a paragraph, any length of text they want, really, and your job is to take that input and count how many words and how many sentences are found inside of that word, sentence, phrase, whatever it may be. Here are the specifications for this project that you must adhere to. First, you must prompt the user to enter a body of text through the Dart command line. Now, this body of text needs to be at least 2 words and at least 1 sentence. If they don't include at least 2 words or 1 sentence, you need to re-prompt them for the information as well as issue them a message. Then you need to calculate 2 things. How many words are in the body of text? How many sentences are in the body of text? To make things easy, you can treat the following characters as the end of a sentence: the exclamation point, a period, or a question mark. You can consider the following characters the end of a word: a space, a comma, a colon, or a semicolon. That's 4 things. If there's anything else you can think of, I want you to figure it out on your own. One of the interesting things you're going to notice as a programmer is sometimes you're going to get incomplete specifications. You're going to need to be good at formulating requests for the product owners or whoever you're developing for, or if it's yourself, you're going to need to be able to create the application on your own as you're going, because you can't always have every single detail spelled out for you. Now, there's 2 ways you can write this. The first is you can do it in a more traditional method, something that is agnostic to programming language and that uses the common control flow structures and syntax. The second, you can try to make this as Dartish as you can, meaning using the built-in functions and methods that come along with all the amazing Dart classes and objects. If you haven't done this before, it's going to feel uncomfortable at times. You need to embrace that discomfort and understand that solving a problem is all about taking something that you don't know how to solve, breaking it down into small chunks, figuring them out, and bringing your solution together. Don't look at the hints or the solutions unless you are completely, truly, and utterly stumped and you've given it your best. So now you are going to press the pause button and get to work. Remember, whether it takes 10 minutes, 2 hours, or a day, you want to do this on your own as much as possible. Hint number 1. You can get data from the command line using the function stdin standard in.readLineSync from the Dart IO library. Remember, you can access any individual character in a string by accessing the string name and then inside of brackets a number. Number 0 would be the first character, number 1 would be the second character, etc. You can make a for or for each loop that traverses through every character in your string, and you can take a different action depending on what type of character that is. If you understand regular expressions, you can leverage them to make this problem quite a bit simpler. If you don't worry, you can still figure it out, but it will be a little more verbose. If you decide to use regular expressions, you're probably going to want to make use of the split method in Dart. Write as many unit tests as you can think of. If you don't know how to use unit tests, check out our video in the beginner playlist all about using unit tests. Pause now and try again after you've listened to these hints. If you still get stuck, you're welcome to move on to the solutions that follow. However, before you do so, I would recommend looking at the Dart documentation or perhaps querying smaller parts of the problem on Stack Overflow or other services. What I don't want you to do is go into ChatGPT, paste the requirements, and ask it to code for you. I know that would be easier. I know it would probably get the job done, but guess what? You're going to know you cheated yourself, and you're not going to have learned as much. And in the end, even if ChatGPT becomes an amazing assistant to you as a developer, you're still going to need to understand the fundamentals to take full advantage of it. So please don't take shortcuts. Booyah! We are back with solution number 1. Now, if you came up with your own solution, before you look at these, I want you to go and post what your solution is in the comments of our YouTube channel, or perhaps on the Substack that is linked in the description. I just want you to share your solution before you view ours. You're going to notice we use Dart create to set up our project, so we have the typical bin, lib, test folders. Inside of our bin file, you'll notice we have void main, and this just runs our process input method. And this just runs our process input function. Let's go to our main file in the lib folder and see what we've got here. So you remember the bin file loaded our process input function. We're defining a string named text that is blank. And then we're creating a map of string and int. So the key will be string and the value will be an int called counters. And we're just initializing that as blank for now. And then we're running a do while loop to run our get input text function and our count words and sentences function. And we're gonna keep looping this over and over and over while we have less than 2 words or less than 1 sentence. Let's go to our get input text function. We're defining it as a string because we want to return a string ultimately. And inside that string, we're again defining a string called text that is blank. And look, we're running another do while loop. We're executing this code block while text is empty. And look what we're doing in here. If text is empty, we're using standard out.write to prompt them for text that is at least 1 sentence and 2+ words. And when they do that, we're returning the text back to them. Now this is a pretty simple function, and you might be wondering why I didn't just do that in this do while loop. Frankly, I just wanted to keep things simple and nice in this primary function to make it easier to read. So once we have our text, you'll notice we're creating this variable called counters, and we're assigning to it count words and sentences. Now, if you notice, and remember, this is a map. So we're creating a function that is type map. And that map is having a key that's a string and a value that's an int. And we're passing into it our text. We're creating a new map in here called results. And if you'll notice, we're initializing it so words is a value 0 and sentences is a value 0. We have a list here called end words. And the only thing that we're ending a word with is a space. Now you might be saying, Jeff, in the specifications you told us to do commas, colons, semicolons, and space. But if you think about it, all of those things when used will be followed by a space. So all we really need to look for is the space. And why are we defining that as a list? Well, because we want to use some of the list methods later on. And then we have our list of strings here called end sentences. And it's going to be as discussed in the specs, an exclamation point, a period, and a question mark. And here we're defining some local counters that we want to use for easier manipulation. We're going to define the number of characters by creating an integer, and we're going to assign to that integer variable the length of the text that we passed into this function. We're going to use a for loop to iterate through every single character in this sentence. So we are setting our int I to 0. We're running this loop while I is less than the number of characters, and we're adding 1 to I each time we iterate through this loop. Inside this for loop, we have a series of if conditions. So we're going to start off looking at our end words list with each character. So does end words contain whatever character we're on? If so, that means that this is the end of a word and we can add words ++. Alternatively, does end sentences not contain text minus I? So this is to make sure that if there's a space after the end of the sentence punctuation, we don't count it as a word. And then we're going to move on and we're going to look through our end sentences list to see, does our end sentences list contain whatever character we're currently processing? Or does end sentences not contain text I minus 1? So this is to prevent sentences like I am mad with 3 exclamation points counting as 3 sentences. You can imagine why we wouldn't want that. And sometimes users in their dramatic flair will enter multiple question marks, an exclamation point, a question mark, and another exclamation point, etc. Now what if we're on the very last character of our text and the user forgot to enter an exclamation point, period, or question mark? We need to account for this as well. So we're going to see if I plus 1 is equal to number of characters, and if end sentences does not contain this character. And if so, we know that it's the end of the word and the end of a sentence. Hopefully the users are going to follow instructions, but since they don't always, we're going to just have this clause here to be safe. And then we're going to set our results words key in the map to the value of the integer words, and the same with sentences. And then we're going to return this result. So we can go back up here to our process input function, and you can see that once we've done that, we're going to print the amount of sentences in that variable and the amount of words in that variable. Let's go ahead and run a test and see how this works. We're going to use the Dart run command, which will execute the file in our bin folder. We're going to type, I really love Flutter, and you should too. I am happy. So this should obviously have two sentences. You can see we have two sentences, and let's count the words to make sure it's right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Fantastic, it looks like it works. Did write some tests here. Can you think of any ways to run tests? This is pretty simple. Let's just go ahead and type Dart test and see if we pass all the tests with our current iteration. Fantastic, it looks like it works. Here we have an application that works, written in a way that most programmers could understand, even if they don't have a comprehensive understanding of Dart. Now we're going to move on to solution number 2. So if you remember, I talked about using regular expressions. Solution number 2 allows us to do just that. So if you'll notice, we are in our bin file, which is our main file, and you'll notice I have a much bigger void main function here. So the first thing that I'm doing is I'm creating two regular expressions, one to check for a sentence and one to check for a word. Now, if you don't understand how these regular expressions work, please click the Substack link in the description. I explain it in greater detail in text. Now we're going to prompt the user for input. We're going to use a do while loop to populate this string input with the contents of readline sync. And once again, we're running our trim function to remove extraneous white spaces. So we're going to do this do while loop while input is empty, or input and the number of words is less than 2. We're using split, if you recall I mentioned that. Or the number of sentences is empty, or the input starts with a space, just in case somehow the trim didn't catch that. Why are we using this split function? The split allows us to split our string based on the contents of our regular expressions here. It's actually really cool. So then we're moving on to count the number of words in the input. We're creating a list of strings called words, and we're putting in all of the splits by word. And then to get the number of words, all we need to do is use the words list .length. It's going to count the number of individual entries in that list. So every single word is going to be put on this list. How cool is that? And we're doing the exact same thing with sentences. We're creating a list of sentences, and we're going to use input.split, and we're using our sentence regular expression as the argument. And then all we have to do to get the number of sentences is to use the length method on our sentences list. This is pretty easy and pretty cool if you know how to use regular expressions. And then we're going to print our statement. The input contains num words and number of sentences. This looks great. You'll notice I was able to accomplish this entire thing inside of the void main function. I could have potentially split some of this into smaller functions in the lib, but honestly, this was so simple, I wanted to keep it all in one place. Let's go ahead and test our application real quick, just to make sure everything's working. We're going to use Dart run, and we're going to type a sentence, I love you, you love me, we are a happy family. So we have 11 words and 3 sentences. Let's count to make sure that's right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So for this solution, I actually didn't write any tests. I want you to see if you can figure out how to write your own tests with this application, and I want you to post them in the comments or alternatively in the comments on our Substack. This is your time to shine. It's your time to think, and it's your time to impress us. So this is Dart Coding Challenge number 3. As always, share your solutions, let us know if you have any questions, and stay tuned for video number 4.